Imagine you're driving on an empty highway at 4 a.m. A flash of headlights grabs your attention as a car swerves wildly ahead. You see her, panicked, pounding on the back window, mouthing for help. It's a moment that turns your stomach, the kind of thing you hope you'd never witness. In that instant, every choice you make matters more than you realize. Tonight, we're sharing 4 real highway encounters that left drivers forever changed. Each story reveals how isolation and darkness can hide danger in plain sight, and how a single decision can decide what happens next. It was supposed to be a normal drive. Quiet, uneventful. The kind of late-night commute where your mind drifts and the hum of the tires on the pavement is almost comforting. The witness had taken this route home after work more times than they could count, a 20-minute stretch of highway that always felt deserted at that hour. Sometimes there were a few red taillights far ahead, sometimes the distant glow of a truck's running lights. But mostly, it was just empty road and the steady rhythm of passing streetlights overhead. Tonight, though, something felt off. The first thing that stood out was a gray Honda Accord coupe coming up fast in the rearview mirror. The witness was already going about 75 or 80 miles per hour, but the Accord had to be pushing 90, maybe even 100. It shot up behind, then swung into the next lane, weaving a little too sharply, drifting toward the shoulder before jerking back. At first, it seemed like maybe the driver was just tired or impatient, someone eager to get home before sunrise. But the way the car moved, the sudden corrections, made the witness uneasy. They eased back, keeping a cautious distance. As the Accord pulled even, the witness noticed something in the back seat. The car passed under a street lamp, and for a split second, the inside was lit up. That's when the witness saw her, a woman in the back, banging on the window, her face twisted in panic. Her hands pressed against the glass, and she was mouthing one word over and over: help. There wasn't time to process it. The witness's heart started pounding. The car surged ahead, but the image of that woman's face stuck. There was no way to ignore it. The witness grabbed their phone and dialed 911, repeating the details as clearly as possible. Gray Honda Accord coupe, speeding north on the interstate. Woman in the back seat in obvious distress. The dispatcher's questions came fast. Direction, license plate if possible, how many people in the car. The witness tried to answer everything, voice shaky at first but growing steadier with each response. Stay with the car, but don't get too close. Officers are on their way, the dispatcher told them. Keeping up wasn't easy. The Accord kept accelerating, sometimes drifting dangerously close to the edge of the road. The witness hovered around 95 miles per hour, just managing to keep the car in sight. Every so often, the driver of the Accord would reach back with a sudden swinging motion, as if trying to hit or restrain the woman. The witness relayed everything to the dispatcher: location, speed, what was happening inside the car. The sense of urgency was overwhelming, but there was no time to think about fear or second-guess the decision to get involved. The Accord's brake lights flared suddenly. The car slowed, and for a moment it looked like it might try to pull over. The witness's mind raced. What if the driver realized they were being followed? What if they tried to confront them? The dispatcher's voice was steady in their ear, reminding them to keep a safe distance and not to intervene directly. Instead of stopping, the Accord swerved again and picked up speed. The witness stayed back, not wanting to lose sight of the car, but also not wanting to provoke the driver. The highway stretched ahead, empty except for the 2 cars, the darkness broken only by the occasional flash of headlights from the opposite direction. After what felt like forever, red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. The witness felt a wave of relief, but the situation was still tense. The Accord must have noticed the police too, because it sped up, trying to put as much distance as possible between itself and the flashing lights. The witness kept close enough to track the car for the dispatcher, even as the sirens grew louder. The chase ended suddenly. The Accord swerved across 2 lanes and screeched to a stop on the shoulder. 2 police cruisers boxed it in, one in front and one behind. Officers jumped out, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The driver of the Accord stepped out, hands up, his posture rigid and defiant. The shouting got louder, the scene chaotic and tense. Then the back door opened and the woman stumbled out. She looked dazed, her face streaked with tears and fear. But she was alive. One of the officers guided her away from the car, speaking quietly to calm her down. The driver was pinned against the hood of the Accord, handcuffed and still muttering. The witness sat in their own car, watching it all unfold, their hands trembling against the steering wheel. Later, police would confirm what the witness already suspected. The woman had been abducted from a public place just hours before. The driver of the Accord was a repeat offender with a long record. Violent crimes, restraining orders, a history of ignoring the law. The woman had been thrown into the back seat, the child locks engaged so she couldn't escape. She'd been desperate, running out of time. If the witness hadn't seen her and called for help, there's no telling how the night would have ended. The drive home after that was silent. The witness kept replaying the scene in their mind. The woman's face, the pounding on the window, the moment of hesitation before making the call. It was hard not to wonder what might have happened if they'd looked away, or convinced themselves it was nothing. Most people assume they'll know exactly what to do in a crisis, but the truth is, hesitation is common. Experts say that freeze response is as natural as fight or flight, and sometimes it's only a split-second decision that makes the difference. For days afterward, the witness thought about the woman and the close call. The officers said it was the right thing to do, reporting what they saw and staying with the car until help arrived. It wasn't heroism, just paying attention and acting on instinct. Still, it was impossible not to wonder how many other emergencies go unnoticed because someone doubts what they see. The highway was empty again, the witnesses' headlights cutting through the dark as they made their way home. Some dangers are impossible to miss, but others aren't so obvious. Sometimes it's a cry for help in the night. Sometimes it's something you don't see until it's right in front of you. And sometimes the real threat is hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. Some dangers on the highway don't announce themselves. They creep up behind you, hidden in the glare of headlights or the shadows of a passing truck. One driver learned this the hard way while crossing Route 20, a long stretch of road running from Chicago to Massachusetts. It was late, about 1 a.m, and after 10 hours behind the wheel, the monotony of the drive had settled in. The highway felt endless, just a dark strip under a pale sky, and the only company was the steady hum of tires and the occasional distant glow of another car. The driver liked these empty stretches. There was something about the way the world faded away, just the dashboard lights and the road ahead. But that night, things changed. Out of nowhere, a pair of headlights appeared in the rearview mirror, drawing closer. The driver moved over to the right lane to let the truck pass, but it didn't. Instead, it tucked in right behind, its lights bright enough to make it hard to see anything else. The pickup stayed close, too close, pressing in like it was trying to push the car forward. He tried to ignore it at first, but the truck wouldn't back off. The driver switched lanes again, hoping the truck would finally pass, but the truck switched too, matching every move. The unease turned to anxiety. The pickup's headlights blinked off and on, not in any pattern, just enough to make it clear this wasn't just impatience. The driver could feel his pulse pick up as the truck started to speed up, pulling ahead for a moment, only to slow down and block the lane. He tried to pass, but every attempt was met with the truck swerving in front, cutting him off. The driver braked hard once to avoid a collision, his hands clamped tight around the steering wheel. The truck's movements got more aggressive, weaving across the lanes and making it impossible to get by. It was more than road rage. It felt deliberate, calculated. Then, as the two vehicles ran side by side for a moment, the driver got a look inside the truck. Two people stared back, both faces hidden behind blank white masks with twisted grins. The masks were the kind you see in old movies or on protest posters, expressionless but somehow threatening. One of them tilted their head, just watching, not saying anything, not making a sound. The driver's stomach dropped. It was like something out of a nightmare. He tried to keep his distance, but the truck wouldn't let up. Every time he slowed, they slowed. When he tried to speed up, they matched him. The game went on for miles, the truck swerving and blocking, never letting him get away. The driver's mind raced through options. Call for help, try to lose them, pull off at the next exit. Every second felt longer than the last. Finally, he saw an exit ramp coming up. It was dark, the kind of road that wound off into the trees, but it was the only chance to get away. As he reached the ramp, he didn't slow down for the red light at the end. He just blew right through it, tires squealing as he turned. He could hear the truck's engine behind him, the rumble growing louder as it followed. The back road was narrow, twisting through thick woods, and the darkness made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. He didn't look back, just kept driving. The headlights behind him flickered through the trees, sometimes close, sometimes farther away. Every turn felt like it might be the one where they caught up, but he kept pushing forward, hoping for a break. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the headlights disappeared. The truck was gone. The only sound was the engine and the rush of blood in his ears. The driver didn't stop, not until he reached a small town miles down the road. He pulled into an empty gas station lot, the bright lights overhead making him feel almost safe. He sat there for a long time, hands shaking, replaying every second. Even after the immediate fear faded, the memory stuck. The masks, the way the truck moved, the feeling of being hunted on an empty road, none of it made sense, but all of it felt real. Later, he'd think about how quickly things can change on a lonely highway. One moment, the world feels quiet and safe. The next, you're being chased by strangers with hidden faces, forced to trust your instincts just to stay alive. The experts say that kind of experience can stick with you, changing the way you see empty roads and headlights in the dark. For this driver, the lesson was simple. Sometimes, the only thing standing between you and something much worse is the decision to act, even if it means breaking the rules. Long after the night was over, the fear lingered. Every time he drove at night, he found himself watching for headlights that got too close, for cars that didn't pass when they should. The masks haunted his thoughts, a reminder that you never really know who's out there or what they want. It made him more cautious, more aware of every car and every shadow on the highway. Not every threat comes with a warning, and not every danger is obvious until it's right beside you. Sometimes it's just a feeling that something isn't right, a flash of white in the dark, a decision to run a red light because your instincts tell you it's the only way to get out. And sometimes, even when you escape, the echoes of that fear follow you into the next stretch of road, waiting for the world to turn strange again. On some nights, the weather itself feels like a warning. Around 1 a.m., a driver found themselves alone on a stretch of highway where fog had settled thick and low. The high beams were almost useless, and the usual comfort of familiar road signs was gone. There was just the dull glow of headlights and the steady sweep of windshield wipers. The sense of isolation grew with every mile, and the driver couldn't shake the feeling that something about this night was different. A shape appeared ahead, vague and shifting in the fog. As the car rolled closer, it took form. A vehicle pulled onto the shoulder, hood up, hazard lights blinking in the mist. A man stood near the front, waving his arms. He was dressed in jeans and a sweatshirt, maybe in his 30s or 40s, and his face was only half lit by the car's approach. The driver slowed, almost without thinking. They had always been the type to help, and the man's urgency felt real. Pulling over just ahead of the stranded car, the driver kept their own engine running. The window went down a few inches, just enough for conversation. "Everything okay?" the driver called out, trying to keep their voice steady. The man jogged up, stopping at the window. He smiled, but it didn't seem to reach his eyes. "Thanks for stopping. My car just died out here. I've been trying to get someone's attention for almost an hour. No cell service, and I'm freezing." The driver hesitated, their hand tight on the steering wheel. The fog made it hard to see anything else, and a small warning bell rang in the back of their mind. Still, the man's story was believable. He looked tired, frustrated, and cold. "What do you need?" the driver asked. He stepped back a little, hands visible, and explained, "I just need to borrow your phone to call a tow truck. It's too dangerous to stay out here tonight." He shrugged, looking embarrassed. "I promise. I'm not trying to cause any trouble." The driver nodded and reached over to grab their phone from the passenger seat. As they did, something about the man's tone changed. Quieter, less desperate. Before the driver could hand over the phone, a sound came from behind the car. It was a quick, soft shuffle, barely loud enough to hear over the engine and the fog-dampened night. "Is someone else with you?" the driver asked, their voice suddenly tense. The man's face didn't change much, but his eyes flicked toward the rear of the car and then back. "No, it's just me," he said too quickly. The driver's grip tightened. A second figure materialized from the fog, moving fast and low along the passenger side. The driver caught a flash of metal, a knife, gripped in the newcomer's hand. Instinct took over. The driver slammed the car into drive, stomped on the gas, and shot forward. The first man lunged at the window, shouting, but the car was already moving, tires screeching against the wet pavement. The second man tried to grab the passenger door, but his hand slipped off as the car accelerated. The driver didn't look back. The fog swallowed the scene as quickly as it had revealed it. They kept the car straight, barely seeing the lines on the road, heart hammering so hard it drowned out the sound of the engine. For miles, there was nothing but the blur of headlights and the memory of that knife glinting in the dark. They didn't stop until a gas station appeared out of the mist, lights bright and harsh against the night. The driver pulled in, parked, and sat there, hands shaking, breath coming in short bursts. It took a while before they could even dial the police. When they finally explained what had happened, the officer on the other end sounded tired but not surprised. "This isn't the first time we've had reports like this," the officer said. "People know that in this kind of weather, drivers are more likely to stop. It's easy to hide in the fog, and most folks want to help." The driver gave as many details as they could: the man's clothes, the make and color of the car, the spot on the highway. The officer promised to send a patrol, but there was no guarantee anyone would be found. As the call ended, the driver's mind kept circling the same thought. What if someone else stopped next? Did those men wait for the next car, or had they been scared off for the night? Studies show that criminals often use tricks like this to prey on people's good intentions. A broken down car, a plea for help, A friendly story. It's all designed to make you lower your guard. The driver realized they had ignored their own instincts at first, pushing aside the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. The fog had made everything harder to see, not just the road, but the warning signs too. The next morning, the driver replayed the whole thing in their head. The way the man smiled, the quick glance he gave into the darkness, the sudden appearance of the second man. The police told them that foggy nights and empty highways make it easier for criminals to hide, and that people are more likely to help when they can't see what's coming. It's a setup that works because it feels safe until the very last second. After that, the driver changed how they thought about helping strangers. They didn't stop at night anymore, especially not in bad weather, and they kept their doors locked even when pulled over. The memory of that night stuck with them, not just the fear, but the realization of how quickly a good deed could turn dangerous. They wondered if the men had tried the same thing on someone else. The question lingered every time they saw a car on the side of the road, especially when the weather was bad. It made them more cautious, but also left them uneasy about a world where kindness could be used as bait. Sometimes it's not just the fear that lingers after a close call, but the way it changes what you're willing to do for someone else. The cost of helping can be much higher than you expect, especially when you don't see the danger until it's already at your door. For some, the instinct to help is automatic. After a long overnight shift at the hospital, exhaustion was the only thing on a worker's mind as they drove home on the nearly empty parkway. The pandemic had changed everything. There were hardly any cars out, and the silence was only broken by the sound of their own engine. The workers' eyes were heavy, but they snapped to attention when they spotted a car stopped on the shoulder, red SOS lights blinking in the dark. It was just past 2 a.m. The worker slowed down, feeling a mix of caution and concern. A man stood next to the car, waving his arms in wide arcs. The vehicle was pulled close to the edge of the shoulder, hazard lights flashing on the wet pavement. The worker rolled down their window just enough to talk, keeping a careful distance. "Everything all right?" they asked, voice low. The man stepped closer, his face half lit by the headlights. He looked tired, maybe a little cold, and his words came quickly. He said he'd been stuck for hours, that his phone was dead, and that he needed to call his brother. He asked if he could borrow the worker's phone just for a minute to get help. There was hesitation, but it was easy to brush aside. The man's story fit. Phone service out here was spotty, and he looked genuinely frustrated. The worker didn't want to be the kind of person who ignored someone stranded in the dark, so they unlocked their phone and handed it over, keeping the window mostly up. "Thank you," the man said, turning away and walking a few steps toward his car, phone pressed to his ear. The worker listened for signs of a real conversation, but only caught bits and pieces, not enough to know for sure. After a minute or two, the worker started to feel uneasy. The call was dragging on, and the man had drifted further into the shadows. "Everything okay?" the worker called out, their voice sharper now. No answer. The man's back was turned, and he seemed to be talking quietly, almost too quietly. The worker considered getting out to retrieve the phone, annoyed by the delay, but before they could move, something shifted in the corner of their eye. Another person, someone who must have been hiding, darted out from behind the broken-down car and moved quickly toward the rear of the worker's vehicle. Panic set in instantly. The car door wrenched open, and the second man, tall and wiry, forced himself inside. He grabbed the worker, one arm clamping around their neck, squeezing tight. The worker struggled, gasping for breath, clawing at the attacker's arm. The man's grip didn't loosen, and his voice was cold and steady. "I'm gonna need you to stop moving." Adrenaline surged. The worker managed to elbow the man in the ribs, just enough to break free for a second. Without thinking, they shoved him back and reached for the gear shift. The first man, still holding the worker's phone, ran toward the car, yelling something the worker couldn't understand. The worker slammed the car into drive and floored it, tires screeching as they tore away from the shoulder. 2 gunshots rang out behind them, loud and sharp. The worker didn't look back. Their hands shook so badly they could barely keep the car straight, and their heart hammered in their chest. The world outside was a blur of darkness and headlights as they sped away, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the attack. When the worker finally made it home, they sat in the driveway, stunned and shaking. It took a long time to gather the nerve to step out and look at the car. The rear windshield was shattered, glass scattered across the back seat. The realization that the shots had been aimed, not just fired into the air, made their legs feel weak. The immediate relief of escape faded fast. The worker reached for their backup phone and called the police, trying to explain what happened while their hands still trembled. That's when they realized the other man still had their phone. Panic returned as they thought about everything stored on that device: contacts, banking apps, personal information. The police told the worker to use Find My iPhone to lock the device, but by the time they tried, it was already offline. It wasn't just the phone that was gone. In the next few hours, the worker saw notifications for password resets and unfamiliar logins. Their cryptocurrency exchange account had been drained, thousands of dollars gone in minutes, transferred to an untraceable wallet. The worker scrambled to freeze accounts, change passwords, and cancel cards, but the damage was done. The police suggested contacting the phone carrier to track the last call made, but the logs were blank. There was no trail to follow. The days after the attack felt unreal. The worker went through the motions, showing up for shifts, answering questions from the police, calling banks and tech support, but their mind kept replaying the moment when they handed over the phone. Every time they thought about it, a wave of guilt and anger followed. They had wanted to help, and that impulse had made them a target. The police explained that these kinds of setups were happening more often. Criminals using fake breakdowns, SOS lights, and believable stories to trick people into stopping. The workers' kindness, the thing that usually made them feel proud, had been used against them. Their trust was gone, replaced by a constant sense of vulnerability. The hospital workers' losses weren't just financial. The fear didn't fade when the glass was swept up or the account secured. It lingered every time they drove home at night, every time they saw a car on the shoulder. They found themselves double-checking locks, glancing in the rearview mirror, and ignoring anyone who looked like they needed help. The lesson was burned in. Trust your instincts, and don't let kindness override caution when you're alone in the dark. In the end, the worker made a promise to themselves. They would never stop for a stranded stranger again, no matter how real the need seemed. The experience left them wary, always alert, and unable to forget how quickly a good deed could turn into something dangerous. It's easy to wonder what might have happened if things had gone differently, or if that moment of hesitation had lasted a second longer. Sometimes, the difference between a close call and a tragedy is measured in the smallest decisions. When you look back at these highway stories, what stands out isn't just the danger, but how close each person came to a completely different ending. The line between walking away and disaster is thinner than most people realize. This section is about that, how survival and tragedy can hinge on a single, ordinary moment that suddenly turns extraordinary. The concept of the thin line between survival and tragedy plays out in every story. There's the fight or flight response, that automatic surge of adrenaline when something feels wrong. For most people, it's not something you think about until you're in it. Take the driver who saw the woman pounding on the window of the speeding Honda Accord. The moment he realized something was wrong, his body went into high alert, heart pounding, hands shaking, mind racing. He could have ignored it, told himself it wasn't his problem, but instead he grabbed his phone and called 911. That single act, fueled by instinct and a sense of responsibility, put a rescue into motion. Adrenaline sharpened his focus enough to keep the car in sight and relay details to the dispatcher, even as nerves threatened to take over. But that same surge can work against you. In high-stress moments, tunnel vision can set in, making it hard to see anything except the immediate threat. That's why it's important to trust your gut signal and keep moving until you're somewhere safe or help arrives. The body's reaction is meant to help, but it can also cloud judgment if you let panic take over. Situational awareness is what bridges the gap between instinct and action. It's not just about noticing what's around you, but about picking up on the small details that tell you when something's off. The hospital worker who stopped for the stranded motorist felt a flicker of doubt, a warning that something didn't add up. The man's story seemed real, but the worker's instincts said otherwise. Still, they handed over their phone, and that's when things went wrong. The attackers took advantage of that small moment of hesitation. The worker managed to escape, but only after things escalated to violence. The driver on Route 20, chased by masked strangers in a black pickup truck, faced a different kind of threat. The adrenaline rush pushed him to make split-second decisions, speeding, weaving through lanes, taking an exit without slowing down. He didn't have the luxury of thinking everything through. The need to escape was immediate and overwhelming. But even in that rush, he paid attention to the truck's moves, the way it matched his speed, the way it blocked every lane change. That awareness, even in the middle of panic, helped him find a way out. There's also the story of the driver in the deep fog at 1 a.m. who pulled over for a man waving beside a broken-down car. The fog made it hard to see, and the situation felt off, but the driver stopped anyway. Only when a second man appeared from the mist, holding a knife, did the driver's instincts take over. They sped off, barely avoiding an ambush. The lesson was clear. Hesitation can be dangerous, but listening to that uneasy feeling can make all the difference. In each of these cases, the drivers faced a moment where they had to choose, act on instinct, or ignore it and hope for the best. The outcomes depended on how quickly they recognized the danger and responded. Trusting that gut feeling, even when it seems irrational, can be a lifesaver. It's not about being paranoid, it's about being prepared for the unexpected. Experts talk about situational awareness as a skill that can be developed. It means staying alert, noticing changes in the environment, and not dismissing the small things that feel out of place. On an empty highway, that could mean watching for cars that don't pass when they should, or noticing when someone's story doesn't quite add up. It also means having a plan, knowing what you'll do if something feels wrong. That might be keeping your doors locked, not rolling down your window all the way, or driving to a well-lit area before stopping. The stories show that hesitation is common. It's easy to second-guess yourself, to wonder if you're overreacting or being rude. But those few seconds of doubt can be costly. The hospital worker's decision to stop and help was rooted in kindness, but the pause before acting on their instincts gave the attackers their chance. The driver chased by the pickup truck hesitated before taking the exit, almost waiting too long. The driver in the fog almost missed the danger until it was nearly too late. What ties all these moments together is the way ordinary situations can shift without warning. A routine drive becomes a crisis in seconds. The difference between getting home safely and something far worse often comes down to whether you notice the warning signs and what you do next. The drivers who made it out did so because they acted, even if it was messy or imperfect. They trusted that uneasy feeling and did something about it. It's not about being fearless. Fear is natural, and it's there for a reason. The key is to use it, to let it sharpen your senses instead of freezing you in place. When something feels wrong, it probably is. Moving towards safety, calling for help, or just refusing to get too close can change the outcome. There's no guaranteed way to avoid every danger on the road, but you can stack the odds in your favor by staying alert and trusting your instincts. The thin line between survival and tragedy isn't always obvious in the moment, but it's there, waiting in the space between doubt and action. What matters most is recognizing it before it disappears. On the highway, the threats aren't always visible. Sometimes they're hidden in the fog, behind a stranger's smile, or in the headlights that follow too closely. The best defense is to stay aware and ready to act, even when everything seems routine. As you think about these stories, it's clear that the real risk isn't always what you see in the dark, but what you don't expect. That's what makes these moments so unpredictable and so important to understand. The real danger on the highway is the unexpected. It isn't always the darkness or the empty miles that put you at risk, but the moments you don't see coming. A stranger waving you down, headlights that won't back off, or a story that doesn't add up. Staying safe means paying attention and trusting your instincts. If something feels off, act right away. Your choices, even the smallest ones, can make all the difference. So, what would you do if faced with a moment like this? Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced danger on the road at night? If these stories shook you, hit like and subscribe for more real-life horror accounts. Stay cautious, stay aware, and let these stories remind you, courage and vigilance matter.